Welcome to the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I'm your host, Anna Gray. The best thing about being a nurse and entrepreneur over the last 25 years are the relationships I've developed and the people I've met. As a legal nurse consultant, I wanted you to hear from those amazing people in the legal and healthcare communities. I wanted you to hear who they are and to celebrate them with me. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered. Let's dive into the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I am really super excited. I know I say this every time, but I am. I'm super excited to have my guest Deb here for many reasons. One of those reasons is we're going to step a little bit outside the box, but not quite out of the box. So I appreciate you being here, Deb, and joining me in this conversation. I can't wait to get to know you a little bit more and mostly share with the audience what you have to say and your journey and what you do now. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to talk to you.
This will be fun. Okay, Deb. Now I'm on the West Coast. We had a little conversation before this about how cold and how warm we are. So can you tell everyone where you are coming from? You're on the cold side.
Anna, I am coming to you from Portland, Maine, which is about 2 hours north of Boston. And this morning at 9 o'clock, it was 9 degrees. It's noontime here now, so we're up to 17. And looking at my weather app, it says we will get to 19 degrees at 1 o'clock.
Gosh, that is a little chilly. But I know that there are listeners who come from that area, so they can relate, and they are, I'm sure they're thinking the same thing. This is I guess I don't know if you're used to it or not, but I can't imagine. So
it's pretty standard for this time of year, although we usually have much more snow. We've only had 14 inches total this year.
So it's light.
So I mean, if you have the snow and the cold, you're getting a double whammy. So,
Pick your poison. Pick your poison. Right. Okay. All right. And I know that you haven't been there your whole life. So where did you grow up there and then move around and come back? Because we're going to get a little bit into that. But where did you grow up?
So I was born in Bar Harbor, Maine, Acadia National Park. Yeah. Yes. I never lived there. I grew up in Bangor, moved to Portland in 99, and I've been here ever since. Although earlier in my life, all of that was, moving to Portland was all post-divorce. But before I was married, right out of high school, I lived in San Diego for a couple of years, and I love it there. I lived in West Palm Beach for a while. I lived in Long Island. And then back in the mid 2004 to 2006, I was in and out of LA quite a bit. I was shooting one of my previous chapters. I was shooting still photography on movie sets.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get it. First of all, I have been to Bar Harbor on a little getaway years and years and years ago. We did a fall foliage trip where we rented a car, and this was before the internet, and had a bed and breakfast book. And so we ended up staying in a bed and breakfast in Bar Harbor, and I loved it there. So that's my little fun fact.
It's beautiful.
Okay, so let's go back. I know that you have a fun journey, and let's talk a little bit about that West Coast journey, because it is different than what you're doing now, but I find it fascinating because I find people's stories fascinating, and how, their journeys are windy and they don't always are not in a straight line, and yours clearly is not in a straight line. So can you tell me a little bit more about your West Coast journey and why you were out here on the West Coast?
Yeah, well, to tell you that, I have to give you a little backstory, but um, post-divorce, I went to court reporting school, and I am a trained court reporter. Spent some time court reporting. Didn't need a 4-year degree to do that. And while I was court reporting, I've always had a camera in my hand, always. And, my sons made some comments about it while they were growing up. And finally, after I got them out of high school and stuff, I decided to go back to college, wanted to get a 4-year degree. I wanted to be a lawyer, and I wanted to, I wanted my concentration to be copyright, trademark, and patent law.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was in school trying to finish up that 4-year degree, I had a concentration in commercial photography, and I ended up starting a photography business and shooting. Yeah. And shooting photography while I was going to school. And that's kind of how I ended up on the West Coast for a while. I was very intrigued with working on movie sets, and I realized that they had still photographers on movie sets. They have them on TV shows too when they're filming those. And actually, there's a gentleman in Los Angeles now. He is from Augusta, Maine, and he was in Portland shooting a movie. And we had some mutual connections, and he hired me to do a still photography gig for him. We worked 2 or 3 weeks here, and then we finished up in LA.
Mm-hmm.
And I continued shooting still photography on movie sets after that.
In LA. Yeah, it's something so, I mean, I live in LA and I've been here for many, many years now. And, I have friends who, work in the business, but I had never met anyone that did still photography on sets. So there's so many jobs that, that movies that they hire for. So, um, I'm sure it was amazing. You get to see, there were probably some pinch me moments, I'm guessing, right? Like, am I really here shooting this?
Well, you're taking me back almost, it'll be 20 years this spring. Yes, so my pinch me moment is the cinematographer that I worked next to on that film was Danny Moder,
Mm-hmm.
who was
Mm-hmm.
Julia Roberts' husband.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
He was a great guy, awesome to work with. And there were some other known names on that set as well.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
so
crazy. I love it.
it is
Okay.
crazy.
So you did that, and then what happened? Why are you not doing that anymore? That's what I want to know.
Well, I still have a camera. I still shoot. I do some acting and modeling as well. However, photography and making a living at it's a pretty tough gig. So while I was building my business, I always had this sales job. Well, one of my sales jobs 7 years ago was legal software,
Okay.
and the type of, the type of legal software that I was selling is similar to what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
So the legal software was a jury data software whereby the lawyers would be able to have all this data about their jury pool, which would allow them to pick a more fair and unbiased jury when they were going to trial.
Mm-hmm.
Having been a court reporter and seeing that job post and having all this sales background, it just seemed like a natural fit.
Interesting.
So I did, yeah, I didn't know anything like that existed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I thought, how great for the
Yeah.
attorney to be
Yeah.
able to have all this information
Mm-hmm.
about their jurors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I took a sales position with that company while I was shooting photography.
So
And
you were on the West Coast doing that? Were you
no,
selling
I
it?
was on the East
You were
Coast.
on the East Coast doing that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you took
Yeah.
that position, and so you were one of their sales people. Who were your target? I mean, obviously they were attorneys, but was it in a certain area, or was it across the U.S.? What did that look like at that time?
Well, I could sell across the country. I could sell to anybody across the country that was going to trial. However, being in Portland, I was in Portland at that time. I kind of kept my focus in Maine because that's my natural market. Boston, natural market. So I kind of kept it there to begin
Mm-hmm,
with.
mm-hmm,
Um, I was with that company for about a year and a half, and then I moved to another company whereby I was the middle person. Like the company didn't know who my clients were, my clients didn't know who my
mm-hmm,
platform was.
mm-hmm.
And then I kind of started doing some jury consulting. I wasn't just giving them this data, but I was helping them to analyze it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then during COVID, the courts were all shut down. I just figured out that I could do this work by myself with my own platform, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what I did. I created a software platform that houses juror data,
Mm-hmm.
and so now I provide the data. And I have a slew of white glove services as
Right.
well.
Right.
Everything from going to court and sitting at the table
Mm-hmm.
and helping them pick a jury, helping them manage the data while they're on site.
Right. So tell me a little bit about when you first were when you first were selling your original um, platform. Um, did you because you were a court reporter, did you already have these relationships with attorneys? Was that a challenge? I'm asking that question because I know that we as legal nurses are essentially selling ourselves to attorneys, and so that seems to be one of those sticking points to a lot of nurses because we're not natural salespeople. So I'm curious on how you were able to get your foot in the door and have these conversations with attorneys initially. Obviously, later on, as you built your own business, you've developed these relationships. But that first, trying to get your foot in the door to have a conversation with an attorney to sell this product, what did that look like for you?
Well, I feel, I don't know if privileged is the word, but the fact that I was able to introduce myself as having been a court reporter, and in
Mm-hmm.
Maine, even though I had been out of court reporting for numerous years, people knew who I was and that I had been in court reporting. So that was an easy, you know, I've transitioned. I'm coming back to the legal profession. I'm not coming back as a court reporter. This is what I'm doing. So that was an easy foot in the door.
Right.
And I was able to have this natural market somewhat right away. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's just kind of grown from there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what is and then okay, so then I want to take it another step with you deciding to do this on your own. You made that decision. I'm going to just do this on my own because I have control of it. Did you have these big goals, or it was just a natural fit? Because I know that as you've gotten further into this, that you've become very successful in what you did. So making that decision, was that a difficult decision, or was it just like, I'm going to just do this?
Yeah, I was just like, no, I'm just going to do this. I
Yeah.
didn't want to, the first company that I'd worked for, unbeknownst to me, I'd built their bottom line so much that they sold their business.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
didn't obviously go with the sale.
Right.
the
Right.
next the next business that I worked for, or I didn't work for them, I used their platform. They started to realize what my client base was and
Mm-hmm.
what my reach was,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't want me using their platform anymore unless I released to them all of my
Oh,
contacts.
right.
And
Right.
I was like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. And
Right.
then, during COVID, we shut down.
Yeah.
I don't know, it was close to, well, I did do one trial in October 2020 in Maine. It was a murder trial.
Mm-hmm.
But then after that, I didn't do anything for, gosh, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months,
Mm-hmm.
somewhere in there. And
Mm-hmm.
I took that period of time and found
Yeah.
myself a software developer. You know, I whoops, sorry. I knew what I wanted. Are you still
Mm-hmm.
there?
Yep.
I knew what I wanted for features.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did go to my attorneys and I said, listen, you've been accustomed to getting all of this data because I used to get professional licenses, criminal background, address history. If somebody had written an article for a journal, medical journal, law journal, I would get those articles,
Mm-hmm.
all this social media. I would get all of this data. And I said, listen, guys, all of this is very expensive. I'm only going to buy what you tell me you can't live without.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So they told me what they couldn't live without, which is the likely political views of their jury
Mm-hmm.
pool.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I buy. And
Mm-hmm.
they, their comment to me was, if that's all we had, we'd be good.
Right. Interesting. So you tailored your product to your list,
Yeah.
which then they know that they've got everything they need. So at the time during COVID developing this platform, and then how did you decide to launch it? Did you just trial it with some attorneys, or do just a hard launch?
I just did a hard launch. I was ready to go in April of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
I had a Boston client that had 3 or 4 trials in
Mm-hmm.
April of 2021, and it just seemed to take off from there.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I I didn't really feel like there was any
Yeah.
downtime.
Right. And now I know you've grown so well. Is it typically a word of mouth thing, or how did you grow so successful with this new platform that you've launched? Was it your existing clientele, or did you grow from there?
It was actually a combination. It was existing clients. It was a couple of really big successes early on. In April of 2021, I had a couple of really big civil cases that we got large awards on.
Mhm.
In the fall of 2021, we used the data to get a full acquittal on a murder trial, which in Maine, this isn't the case all over the country, but in Maine, if you get charged with murder, if they don't find you guilty of murder, then they have to look at manslaughter.
Mhm.
So a full acquittal is not guilty on both of those counts.
Right, right.
So we got our first full acquittal that we'd had. The attorney told me since the 90s, and that was
Wow.
in 2021.
Yeah.
And then there was another criminal case. A young gentleman had been charged with 6 different counts of assault. everything from assault to aggravated assault to assault with a deadly weapon, and we got not guilty on all of those 6 charges. So that news kind of spread fast.
Yeah.
Through the legal community.
Sure.
So, it's still, still with some of my existing clients, then it became word of mouth, then it was, some of the wins that I've had. I just assisted in a case. I shouldn't say assisted. They used the data in a case that settled the night before jury selection, just a couple weeks ago. It was a $5 million case, which for me that's big money.
Yeah.
And and then I do cold call, and I do go to functions, and I do the
get the word out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so for those of us, let's just say you're talking to a nurse who's just stepped into the legal world, who don't know much about jury selection. Can you give us like I don't want to say a day in the life of, but kind of a day in the life of, like, all right, explain to us what exactly you do I'm not an attorney, but what you do when it comes to jury selection, just so that we as legal nurses can understand that. And actually, since we have conversations with attorneys, it would be a great conversation to have with them as well, because most of us don't understand it. I know for me, it doesn't come natural to understand how a jury works and where your program, your platform comes into play. Bits and pieces I understand. But can you explain that in a nutshell? Like a day in the life of? I know it's a really loaded question.
Well, and let's preface it with, I'm not an attorney either, and I don't purport to be or purport to take their place. It is a very collaborative. I try to make it a very collaborative effort, and I always tell the attorney, this isn't about me. This isn't me telling you exactly, who you're going to pick. I like to put our heads together, but. So typically it will start with a phone call from an attorney. I have a case going to trial. It's on such and such a date. It's civil, it's criminal. What do you got? How can you help me? And so I let the attorney talk and tell me a little bit about the case. I tell him a little bit about what I do and how I do it. And in criminal cases, there's specific, according to the case, there's specific likely political views that you're going to want to know. Like, if you've got a case and you've got a defendant that's African American, you're going to want to know how your jury pool feels about Black Lives Matter. If that person is an immigrant by chance, you're going to want to know how the jury pool feels about immigration, about the border wall, those types of things. And so that allows you to, my program allows us to go into each juror, see their likely political views. Then we're able to rate, rank, sort, color code. So by the time we hit jury selection, an attorney can say to me, Deb, show me all of the people that we don't want. And I can hit a button and it comes up. And then, in a civil case, things are a little bit different. This civil case I just worked on, there were 2 unions that were part of, there was a plaintiff, but there were 2 unions in the backdrop. So I wanted to know how people felt about unions, if they were beneficial or not.
Right.
Because that's something that's going to come up during the case, that there's 2 unions involved. So we kind of talked through those things, and one of the the first questions I ask, or I try to find out, is what the venue is. I just had, and we were talking before we started recording, but I've just had a client call me from Tacoma, Washington, wanting to use me on a case. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to work with him or not. We're trying to figure it out. But one of my challenges in that situation is that on the West Coast, Los Angeles, California, I'm not sure about Oregon, but Washington, you get your jury pool list as you're walking through the door to the courthouse for jury selection. So it doesn't give me any time really to research the jury. On the East Coast, most of my venues that I'm working in right now, I get that jury pool list up to 30 days ahead of time, which allows us to assure the client's constitutional right to a fair and unbiased jury. On the West Coast, when you're getting that as you're walking through the door, you have no opportunity to research. I'm not sure that I feel like my hands are tied as far as assuring that their constitutional right is being protected.
Right. That makes sense. It's fascinating how the legal system is the same, but yet so different, depending on where you're at.
It's not just about, what's on my computer screen. I sit at counsel table lots of times, and sometimes what's on the computer screen and what we know about this juror, then they come into court and they might present quite differently. They might say things that are a little bit different. So, maybe at first we didn't want them based on what we saw on paper.
Right.
But then we get to court and we're like, maybe we do want them after all.
Right.
Or vice versa. We have jurors that we unequivocally want when we see them on paper. And then when we get to jury selection, we're like, no.
Yeah. So that's actually a really interesting piece. It's not only is it your platform that's, pulling data points, but it's also your collaborating with your thoughts on, their body language or whatever. Did you have any background in that kind of, sociology or, how behavioral studies?
Well, I don't have any formal training in that. However, as I said to a prosecutor a couple years ago when I was working in Minneapolis, she asked me the same question. And my response to her was, no, I don't actually, which is very different path than most jury consultants. But what I did have was a very successful sales career. And if you can sell successfully, you can pick a jury successfully because all it is reading people.
Yeah, right. Sales psychology. It's kind of the same thing. It's a psychology around, a certain topic or subject, or in this case, defending or prosecuting. Yeah, I find that fascinating. I also find it fascinating as to where, and I'm sure that I'm not the only one thinking this. It's like, where do they get these data points? Where do they pull those data points? I know nowadays we have social media and people talk about those things, or, whatever you put out there is public knowledge, but are there data points, or, where would they get that information? Typically?
Well, that is the only thing I can say to that is the information that I get is public information. Sure. Anybody could get it if they knew where to get it.
Right.
It's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
And really the answer to your question would probably be proprietary.
Sure, of course. No. I understand that. It's just fascinating that, like, what we say or what we think is out there for the public to, pull and read and analyze. I find that fascinating. Just that it's out there. So, Okay. So can you share with the audience what your company's name is, what the program, your product is, and I want them to be able to see. My whole goal on this podcast is to be able to help my guests, lift my guests up, support my guests. And and you've got a whole group of legal nurse consultants who are constantly having conversations with attorneys. And like I said, a lot of them are on the East Coast. So can you share what your company's name is and how they can, connect with you or connect an attorney with you or, make your life a little bit easier.
So the name of my company is Jury Dat, and that's just the way it sounds, jurydat.com. My phone number is on there. You can email me, deb@jurydat.com. There's also a form on the website to fill out if you have a case coming up and you'd like to talk about it. I just kind of ask you to tell me the name of the case, the docket number, when it's going. I always like to know who opposing counsel is. I don't want to get myself in a situation where, unbeknownst to me, I'm talking to both sides. I only work with one side per case. And it's pretty much whoever makes the investment first. But I'm really careful not to conflict myself out and to hopefully work with one side or the other.
Yeah. Do you find yourself working on multiple cases at once, or is it typically one at a time?
It's usually, that goes back and forth. I was working on just that one criminal case the end of the year. I mean, a civil case the end of the year. And that settled, and then boom, I've got 2 criminal cases I'm working on right now.
Right.
With a bunch of other, mostly civil stuff that's kind of bubbling right at the moment. Hopefully I'll get to do the Tacoma case, but I don't really know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what your future look like? Does it look like, you want to expand across the whole U.S., or do you want to stay on the East Coast, or what does that look like to you? What do you see it, or how do you see it happening?
That is a really good question. I get really like the case in Tacoma is a trucking case. My plaintiff has been horribly injured. Well, he's a doctor, as a matter of fact. He probably will never work again.
Right.
So you kind of get passionate about, helping somebody in that situation. I do a lot of employment work. Love working for the employee, especially when it's an egregious situation on the part of the employer. Although I have worked for the employer, and so I don't know that I can say a region, but obviously I've got to work in a region where I'm getting the jury pool list in an adequate.
Sure, right, where it makes sense. Yeah, exactly.
But what I have been really interested in is working on cases that are in the entertainment industry, or maybe there's a patent situation or a trademark situation. There's some fashion designer cases in the pipeline. Not for me, but I'm aware. And I did, the case with Alec Baldwin and Hannah. That was a really interesting case.
Right.
I didn't work on it, but it was really interesting case that I would have loved to have worked on.
Yeah. So there's also, this is what's fascinating, is that there are so many different types of cases that you can be a part of. So really, it sounds like you're following what sounds interesting and sounds like something that you would want to be a part of, which I think is like the perfect path. If you could be doing just the cases that you find interesting and, feel like you provide value versus any case that shows up on your doorstep. That sounds to me like a perfect situation. So,
Well, the civil case that I did in January was all about lobster fishing. And it was
interesting.
It was all down East Maine and, Bar Harbor and Millbridge. And my grandfather was a lobster fisherman after he left the military and came off the Great Lakes. So when that came to me, I was like, I'm all in on this case.
I love that. Yeah.
Right up my alley.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I've thought about taking on more cases if I can get, if maybe I'll hire some salespeople to do those cases that maybe I'm not as passionate about, but
definitely that you can still expand. Yeah. That's interesting. Okay. Well, I know we just really scratched the surface, but I really wanted to get people to hear who you are and where you came from. I know we've had conversations outside of this podcast, but I think that what you do is incredibly fascinating because it's so far out of my scope, but yet it's still a piece of the puzzle that we all hold. And that's one of the things, I'm going to say the word fascinating again. I think it's fascinating that there are so many different aspects of the legal world that we all kind of play a little piece in, that it's like this big collaborative environment. And I'm glad that you were able to share a little bit about that with my audience, because I know that it is totally foreign to me, that it even existed until I connected with you. So thank you for the enlightenment of just what you do. And I'm really excited for you. I'm a huge fan of an entrepreneur, that's taken their skills or their journey and have put it together into something that they're incredibly proud of. And they've decided to do this on their own and just take it to, whatever comes next. So I give you a huge high five for that. I love meeting entrepreneurial people that just have taken what they've done in the past and have created something, or followed their heart, or followed their purpose in life and really put themselves out there. So thank you for sharing that with us. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. I feel blessed. I feel, people ask me, how did you get into this? It's not a path that I chose. I just kind of fell into it.
Right. Which I just think is so cool. It's like you were clearly listening to the universe that up and said, hey, maybe this is your path. I'm a big fan of that. So congratulations on everything.
Thank you. Thank you.
And all of Deb's information will be in the show notes, so you can easily click on her information and connect with her. And I'm sure that you're going to get an influx of messages thanking you for sharing your story, or asking questions, or maybe they have someone that needs your services. So don't be surprised.
Well, I'll gladly answer all of them. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one. Thank you for joining us in this fun conversation on the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I hope you found this episode as inspiring and empowering as I always do. And I hope that you share this episode with your friends. If you enjoyed it, I would love it if you could leave us a review or comment, as I would love to share them in the future episodes. Or hop on over into my DMs and send me a quick message. I can be found on Instagram at anna.b.gray, on my website at limitlesslnc.com, and over on LinkedIn at Anna Gray. And I want you to remember, you are limitless. Until next time.